Hey everybody, today I'd like to cover a quick build tips video on the Crossbones quadcopter kit from Quadrysteria. And this is a 210mm kit you can get from their website. And what I did was I bought the entire kit. You can get different subcomponents of it. So I just got the entire kit with the camera, flight controller, an ESC, and all the carbon fiber and other miscellaneous parts, and just a few extras like props and things like that. So I ran into a few issues. These are just pretty much my own issues in building this kit, and I thought I'd put together a quick video to kind of go through some of those and provide some information that might be helpful to some people when they go to build this. Now, this is only my second quad that I've built. First one being this Cheerson 117 over here. I'll just kind of put it up here for comparison. Obviously a different class of quadcopter altogether. This has brush motors, even though the beefier ones, these are 65mm Kong props, and it's just not as powerful as this one. Obviously this is just a different class altogether, but just wanted to kind of show this by comparison, and things that I learned in this build I carried over into this build. So I want to start by talking about the 4-in-1 ESC. So what you get with the kit is a 4-in-1 ESC. It's a 30 amp ESC from Cicada, and I guess the 4-in-1 ESCs are becoming more popular now with these type of kits. They didn't used to be, I guess, very reliable, but now they've gotten really good, so they're finding their way into more and more builds. And I'd never done a kit or build with this type of ESC, and obviously you can see the wires, they just go straight into the ESC here. There's 3 pads per motor. So before I get into some of the issues in wiring up the ESC to the flight controller, by the way, this is the Dodo flight controller. That's what comes with the kit that I bought. We'll talk about the soldering pads here. So for whatever reason, these soldering pads on the ESC, they're silver, and I had a little trouble trying to get the solder to stick on these very well. I had to end up turning up the heat on my soldering iron quite a bit to get it to melt. And part of the problem might have been I started using this new lead-free solder, which is great for the first time you solder a joint, but if you need to do any rework, it can be a little bit difficult to work with. It kind of turns a dark gray, and it's very hard to remelt. So eventually what I did was, after having trouble soldering this a little bit, I went back to my rosin core solder, which has got more lead, a little bit of lead in it, and also I used this thing I ordered, which is called a flux pen for rework. And what you do is you use this pen to paint the thing you're trying to solder, and it just helps the solder to flow where you want it to and control it, and helps you do the rework a little easier. So I mean, not a big deal, but I got a little frustrated trying to solder these joints, as it just didn't seem like the solder flowed like it does to a normal copper connection. So just be aware of that when you solder these wires on. Alright, so now we'll talk about connecting the ESC to the flight controller. So on the ESC itself, there's 4 wires, I think numbered M1 through M4, and on the flight controller it's S1 through S4, or I could have that reversed. It could be S1 through 1 through 4 on the ESC and M1 through 4 on the flight controller. Regardless, what I did when I first wired this together was I just wired 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and 4 to 4. Well, that didn't work out very well, because the numbering system on the ESC does not match the numbering system on the flight controller. So I think the normal, I could be wrong about this, someone yell at me if I'm not right, but I think the normal numbering system is 1, 2, 3, 4. For whatever reason, the ESC has them wired differently. So I'm just going to tell you what I ended up doing was soldering 1 wire to each pad, and then testing it, hooking up the power, and then getting the motors to spin, and finally desoldering and resoldering until I got the right wire to the right pad. Okay, so what I ended up with was, I'll tell you the color combination that the ordering of the wires here, if I can zoom in on this. Okay, there it is. So what you're going to have is, you're going to have green, yellow, orange, blue. So green, yellow, orange, blue from left to right. And left to right is top down. And I have the flight controller, obviously the usual direction with a USB in the back and chips on the top, and same with the ESC. So that one just goes one direction. There's even, I think, an arrow on the ESC itself. So again, the wires, I wish I'd taken a picture of this before I put it all together, but I ended up with the ordering here is green, yellow, orange, blue. Okay, so hopefully that'll save you some time. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is probably the OSD. So let's talk about the OSD mod you want to do with this camera. So you get this Fox here. I think it's the one. Now that's what it looks like. I can't remember the exact model. Okay, so it has that designation there. Yeah. The video transmitter that you get is the Unify Pro, and with the camera itself, it has an OSD on it, which is great. I wasn't used to that because the Cheers that I have now doesn't have anything that advanced. So what the OSD lets you do is adjust your various settings, contrast, and type of picture you're getting, and all kinds of different settings in there. It's a really nice camera. I haven't actually flown again. I haven't flown this drone. The picture looks just incredible. I mean, I hope it's really that great when I'm out flying. So getting back to the OSD. So in order to get access to the OSD, you're going to want to do this mod. Now let me start with the wire that you get with the camera. It looks like this. It has this cable, and on the other side is the RCA parts that I chopped off. They look like this. There's this and this. I just cut those off. What you'll find online on YouTube is some videos on how to do this mod. And if you use the mod where you're going to build this thing, this connector, and connect it into your OSD, into your camera, you'll be able to control the menu with this joystick. Alright, so you'll find a lot of videos online on how to do this, but I'll just quickly make some points about how this works, how this mod is done. So again, on the other side, you cut the cables. You have 4 wires inside. There's 2 of them are colored. I think it's blue and green or something like that. You can cut those off. You won't need those. You'll be left with a black and a white wire. So basically, you get your connector, JST, or whatever you want to use. I just happen to have extra ones, so I use that. I think other people use those little tiny white ones for battery connectors, but JST is fine. Again, what you'll want to do is solder black to black, and red to white. Okay, so white comes off here, and again the other 2 wires, just leave them cut off, and then you just put a nice heat shrink on there. You're good to go. And then you'll plug that into this cable, this plug here. Alright, so setting that aside, now we'll talk about this plug. So the way this wires in is you have the red wire into the white wire that goes into the OSD pin on the camera, and then black goes to ground. It's just that simple. It's really not really hard at all. That's it. When you power up your drone, you'll be able to go in, connect this up, and you'll see the OSD on your FPV camera, FPV visor or screen, whatever you have, and you'll be able to work the menu with this joystick. That's really great. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is some of the wiring challenges that I had with the power. So in the back, you have the normal fat wires that come in. Now those wires, they go right into the ESC. So there's 2 little pads in the back, and the challenge is then how to get power from that ESC to the flight controller. So what I did was I used a little extra length of wire from these motor wires that I had to cut short. And so I used a little length to just bridge, actually plug in the, wire up the flight controller from the ESC. So, 5 volts goes on the pad, and then an extra wire soldered on top of that. So basically a junction of pad, red wire, black wire, and then black wire to 5 volts on the flight controller, and then same thing with the ground. Black in to the to the ESC, then black wire to the ground on the FC on the flight controller. Now, when it came to extra stuff that had to be grounded, I ended up with like 4 black wires, and that's not going to work real well trying to solder all those together in one little pad. So what I did was I used yet another length and just bridged that out. So I basically went from the flight controller, had a little stubby wire coming out, and then soldered everything together, those 3 or 4 wires together, heat shrinked it together, and it worked fine. And that way, if I have to desolder things, I don't have a big mess to deal with. I can swap the flight controller out a lot easier. I just have one wire coming into it rather than, one wire coming in and one wire off of that to everything else. I hope that makes sense. It's a little confusing when you put this together because, the battery wires are real thick. I think that's just mainly for durability. These wires here will apparently carry that same voltage, and then you get down to the really tiny wires that carry 5 volts. That's fine. Now back to the Unify Pro. So one thing that on the video transmitter that was a little bit confusing was that it has a voltage in. Now I thought that needed 5 volts regulated power, so I went off the 5 volts regulated on the flight controller, and I couldn't get my camera to work. Then I realized, well, actually the label says 6 volt or higher. So basically the transmitter, the Unify Pro, just wires power right off, gets power right off the battery, directly off the battery. So that's what you should do, and then it worked fine. Which is a little surprising. It doesn't need regulated power. I guess it's got its own regulator or whatever. So that was pretty easy to figure that out. All right, now let's talk about some of the stuff in the back of the quad here. The antenna that you get, or I think it comes with a kit. I'm not sure. Maybe it came with I forget now where the antenna, which piece it came with. Oh, I guess it comes with the video transmitter card. In any case, the barrel connector that is used on the back of this is a little too small for the back plate. These holes are just a little too big for this, and it's just loose. And when you tighten that bolt down, it's still loose. So what I ended up doing was just using a little super glue on the brass connector on the back, and it seems to be really strong. I was able to crank down on that little screw with a crescent wrench and to tighten it up, snug it up, and it didn't break. So I'm hoping that will stay, it won't break off or anything. The other thing I did with the antenna wire from my Spectrum receiver is I ran it up like a lot of guys do. They wire it up like this, and then they use this little zip tie with a shrink wrap. I think that looks pretty cool. So that works fine. Now, one thing that the kit really did, I was really impressed by this. I mean, so these side plates here for the camera, they fit into these little slots, nice and neat. And then this the center thing has a pin, has a little recess. Sorry, there's a hole here with a post for the camera, which allows the camera to move up and down smoothly, and yet fairly, there's some resistance there, so it's not going to, bounce around. It's really great. I mean, the fitment in here is perfect because what you end up doing is squeezing this thing a little bit on the sides as you push this in, and that's just enough pressure to allow this thing, you don't have to use any screws here at all. There's no tightening. It's actually a pressure fit. It's very well done. Kudos to Ron for really doing that, in a way where we don't have extra hardware we need to use. All right, so I'm trying to think what else I want to talk about in terms of this build. So let's turn it over. One thing you need to be aware of, I'm a little bit of a noob when it comes to building these quads, is I used the anodized parts. These are aluminum screws. I used those here originally, which was wrong. So you want to use the titanium screws. Those are the gunmetal gray ones, and there's four. There's four in the middle for the arms, and then four to the outside for the outside plate, and then the aluminum nice red anodized ones are used on the top. There's 5 there, sorry, 6 there, and 2 on the bottom. That's 8 total. And then when it comes to the battery plate, what a lot of people are doing is they mount their batteries. What they have to do is mount their batteries sideways. Now that has an advantage of kind of keeping the damage down. I mean, this is a wider area, so when you have a crash, you're less likely to wreck too much of the battery. I mean, it kind of distributes the force of the impact across the the side. When you have it mounted like this, then the whole front of the battery gets the brunt of the impact, and so you'll see a lot of packs that get kind of crunched up. I haven't flown a quad like this, so I'm just going to start with mounting it like this and just see how it goes. But if I want to flip it around, you just simply take this plate off, flip it 90 degrees, and now your strap will go this way, and you'll be flying it this way. Less aerodynamic, but apparently some people like that, again, because it's a little more resistant to damage in a crash. Another nice thing it comes with are these foam pads, which give you a nice pad to work with on your pit. Okay, I accidentally hit stop on the camera, so I'm going to restart this video at this point. I think I've covered everything I want to on the quadcopter itself, but I thought I'd add a few points about some of the things that I use to build this quadcopter. I'm kind of new to this hobby, although I've been in RC with my planes for a long time. I did end up buying a few things to help me with these different builds, and you might find them useful as well. So let's take a look here. The first thing I want to talk about are these little carbide bits that you can get on Amazon, and they go from 0.3 to 1.2. These are carbon bits that you can use to drill out small holes in your props or chassis or whatever you want. One thing I would note about these bits is they're very fragile, so don't put any force on them. They'll crack or they'll break. You can see this one on the end here, which is the one I was using for that Cheerson project, and I ended up breaking the drill bit with very little force at all. So just be really careful when you use these carbide bits. Some of the tools that I use include a good set of wire strippers. These are put the wire in, and it helps you to strip a wire. It's not good for really tiny wires. Really tiny wires, just use a X-Acto knife, but for larger wires, this makes short work out of stripping wire back. And I also picked up a box of these nylon parts. So these little parts in here, I think it's like $10 or so, standoffs and nylon nuts and things like that. I think the kit itself, I had extra parts, so I ended up just adding those to here. I don't know if I'll need these, but I hate to be without parts. One thing I learned in the RC world is it's painful to be out in the field and you need a little washer, or you need some particular hardware and come up short, and then potentially have to go home or something. So I just, having this stuff here is good. Another thing that I picked up was a digital scale. So let's take a look at this. This digital scale is good for weighing your quad to see potentially how good a job you did compared to someone else building the same kit. So let's just weigh this quad. I haven't weighed it yet. 316. Okay. I don't know if that's good or bad, but 316 grams. The scale goes from 0 to 2,000. I should say from 1 gram to 2,000 grams in 1/10 gram increments. So it's pretty accurate. I've used it to weigh various parts and compare, say, weight of a motor to the weight of a different motor or whatever it might be. You can zero it out with the touch of a button here, and again, it's really convenient for weighing small objects. Another thing that I was introduced to as I built these quads is this tape from 3M called Dual-Lock, or Duralock. I call it Duralock. I guess some people call it Duralock. I guess it's really called Dual-Lock. In any event, it's a little like Velcro, but it's a lot stronger. As you can see, the tines are really close together and they're kind of in a wavy pattern. You can use this stuff on the back of your batteries. For example, I have some of my smaller 2-cell batteries here with this stuff on the back, and it's really great. I mean, it's actually fun to hook your battery. You just stick it in there, and you know it's very strong. It's not going to come off but when it does come off, it doesn't wear down like sometimes Velcro does. Stuff is really strong, so I highly recommend this for certain builds where you don't really want to use a rubber band necessarily. Rubber bands have a tendency to break. These will not. This adhesive in the back is really strong. It's not going to pop off of there. And to take it off, it requires enough force, but it does come off pretty easily. So another thing that you might find that is good is some double-sided tape. This stuff again is 3M product. It's mounting tape. Get a roll of this stuff. It's super strong and you can use it to mount anything. I use it between all of my certain boards, like for mounting up the receiver and transmitter and stuff. So, and another tool I find useful, I was putting off buying until I finally got into this hobby, which is this micrometer. So this gives you the ability to measure small objects without any trouble at all. You can measure the thickness of, say, your quad. Let's try this. Try this out real quick. Okay, it's hard to do and hold the camera, but you can see it's 5 millimeters. So it's great for measuring small things, diameters of props, everything down to hundredths of a millimeter. So very handy. Another thing that I use, I think a lot of people do, are these alligator clips that you can use to solder. So what I do is generally have one wire this way, another wire this way, they kind of meet in the middle. Take my soldering iron and weld the two wires together. First you pre-tin the wires, then you weld them together with this solder iron. It holds everything in place and makes your job a lot easier. And along with the soldering stuff, I have one of these brass pads. Let you clean your tip really easily. I do recommend a good quality soldering iron, and the types of soldering iron I have comes with these ceramic tips of various sizes. Generally I use 2 different sizes. I have this one here, as you can see, is kind of a little bit burned. And then I moved to this slightly larger tip for some of the work on this quad because the wires were a little bigger. When I go to build another kit, I've got another one over there that I'm going to build. It's back to the small tiny wires again, so I'll probably move to a smaller tip. Speaking of soldering iron, this is the one I use. I like it because it costs a little more money, but gives you the ability to change the temperature. It goes from all the way up to 896 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's programmable. You can set all kinds of settings on there. I don't really do too much with it. I basically set it for 630 degrees, 633, use it there. And if I have something really hot, I might bump it up to 800 or 750 or so. Nice thing about this one is it heats up very quickly. So if you want to do something really fast, you got one little repair job you want to do, you can turn this thing on. It's hot within a few seconds, and then you can do your job and then turn it back off, and you don't have to worry about leaving it on. It also has an auto off feature if you don't use it for a while. I think there's some kind of sensor on the tip where if it doesn't move for very long, it shuts off, which is great, when it fires. And other tools, a nice good quality wire cutter is great to have. Let's see, that's about it really. Yeah, just a few tools that I find useful for building these kits. Hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And thanks for watching. See you next time.